Detroit, let me tell you something. Sometimes the best Lions news does not come wrapped in a press release or blockbuster signing announcement. Sometimes it comes in the form of two quiet surprises that, when you sit down and really think about them, paint a picture of a team that is being built the right way, navigating adversity better than most, and rolling into the 2026 season with a schedule and a setup that is absolutely loaded with opportunity. We are breaking it all down today on Lions Focus. We have got the Athletics win projections for the 2026 season and what that number really means in the context of the entire NFL landscape. We have got a full breakdown of the defensive departures this offseason that nobody saw coming and why the Lions actually came out ahead. And we have got a schedule breakdown with 2 games circled in red that every Lions fan needs to have on their radar before this season even kicks off. My name is Lions Focus, and this is your home for Detroit Lions news every single day. Let's get into it. Let us start with the Athletics win projection model, which just dropped and has the Detroit Lions pegged at 10.3 wins for the 2026 season. And I know what the first reaction from the Lions faithful is going to be. 10 wins? We can do way better than 10 wins. And honestly, look, that instinct is not wrong. If when you watch this roster, when you see what is in that building, when you look at the schedule they are about to play, 10 wins feels like a floor, not a ceiling. But here is the thing that people need to understand about what that number actually means in the larger context of the NFL landscape. 10.3 wins places the Detroit Lions 5th in the entire National Football League, 5th out of 32 teams. ESPN analyst Mike Clay went even further in his projection, placing the Lions at 12.1 wins for the season. DraftKings and FanDuel have the over/under sitting right at 10.5 wins. The Lions are favorites in all but 3 games on their schedule. 3. This is not a team that is projected to be scraping for a wild card spot. This is a team that projection models across the board are placing right in the thick of the NFC's elite conversation before a single snap has been played. But here's where the nuance really matters. 4 of the 5 teams projected ahead of or alongside the Lions are NFC clubs. The Seahawks and the Rams are both sitting in that same tier as Detroit. And that means the playoff road through the NFC is not going to be gentle. The Lions are not operating in some private bubble where they get to coast into the postseason. They are going to have to fight for every seed, every game, every moment of momentum through one of the most competitive conference brackets in modern football. Now let me give you the perspective that keeps Lions fans grounded when the season inevitably gets bumpy. On a 17-game schedule, a team with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations can lose 6 games and still be 11-6, 6 losses. Let that sink in for a moment. When the Lions drop a game in Week 7 and the social media commentary starts going sideways, when people are posting about the season being cooked after 2 straight losses, just remember this number. 11-6 is the target. That is what gets you deep into the playoffs. That is the real benchmark here. The Lions are not going to go 16-1. No team does that consistently. What they are capable of doing is winning the games they are supposed to win, stealing 1 or 2 they are not supposed to win, and absorbing the losses that every single team in this league takes over the course of a long season. Think about what happened in 2025. The Lions finished 9-8, lost to the Minnesota Vikings twice in a season where Max Hollins was leading the charge, and the Vikings were supposed to be a second-rate team in the division and ended up 4th in the NFC North. It was brutal. It was ugly. Nobody saw that coming. But look at what shifted as a result. The Lions now own one of the easiest schedules in the entire NFL for 2026, playing opponents who combined for a .467 winning percentage last season, giving them the 6th most favorable schedule in the league. Finishing last in the division in 2025 means the 2026 schedule is loaded with winnable games. The Lions went from the hardest schedule tier in the league 2 years ago to one of the most forgiving setups you could ask for. This is not a coincidence. This is the NFL's scheduling formula working exactly as designed, and it is working in Detroit's favor right now. So when someone says the Lions are projected for 10 wins and tries to use that as a slight, flip it right back at them. 5th in the NFL, 6th easiest schedule, favorites in all but 3 games, win projections of 12.1 from ESPN. This is what a legitimate Super Bowl contender looks like on paper heading into the season, and the Lions are wearing that label in 2026. Now, here's the second surprise, and this one blindsided everybody in Lions Nation back during free agency season. The Lions lost some significant pieces on defense, and they lost them fast, and they lost them to contracts that nobody saw coming. Roy Lopez, Alex Anzalone, Amik Robertson, and DJ Reader. 4 contributors, 4 departures, all in the same offseason. And the money these guys got elsewhere was enough to make Brad Holmes and the Lions front office take one look and say, no thank you. Roy Lopez headed back to the Arizona Cardinals on a 2-year deal worth $10.5 million. That is a guy Detroit was paying around $3.5 million for one season of work. He was solid. 30 tackles, 2 sacks, 13 pressures, contributed meaningfully to the Lions' run defense all year. But nearly doubling his money to keep him was not the calculation that made sense for Detroit's cap structure, and so the Cardinals swooped in and got him. Alex Anzalone, one of the emotional leaders of this team and one of the most respected voices in Dan Campbell's locker room, took his talents to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a 2-year, $17 million deal. $17 million. For a linebacker who was borderline injury-prone and inconsistent in his availability over multiple seasons. Now, the Buccaneers paid a serious premium for what Anzalone brings. Cornerback Amik Robertson, who frankly was about as inconsistent as any player on this roster in 2025, somehow walked out of Detroit with a 2-year deal from the Washington Commanders worth up to $16 million. Nobody had that on their bingo card. And nose tackle DJ Reader, who finished his Lions tenure with 23 combined tackles and 3 sacks before injuries caught up with him, landed with the New York Giants on a 2-year, $12.5 million deal. 4 players, 4 2-year contracts, over $57 million in new money that all went elsewhere rather than staying in Detroit. And while it hurt in the moment, because you always feel the sting when familiar faces leave, here's the truth that Lions fans need to sit with for a second. The Lions found better replacements. They actually upgraded at several of these positions. You bring in Derek Moore, a second-round edge rusher with a 92-plus pass rush grade in his final college season, to give Aiden Hutchinson the bookend partner he has been missing since this team's defensive identity was first built. You bring in veteran depth to replace the interior losses. You drafted players who project to step directly into expanded roles, and the money that did not go to Lopez and Reader and Robertson, that money gets redirected to areas where the Lions can maximize their value, which is exactly how Brad Holmes has operated this entire rebuild. Now, of all the departures, the Lopez one stings a little bit because the Lions genuinely needed interior defensive line help heading into the season, not less of it. Lopez was not a superstar, but he was reliable, and he gave this team production in a rotation that needed every healthy body it could find. The Lions' defensive line was plagued by injuries in 2025, and Lopez was one of the guys who stayed on the field and kept showing up. Losing that kind of consistency hurts. But the Lions have Tyleik Williams waiting in the wings, the 2025 first-round pick who played 446 snaps last season and is now positioned to take on a much larger role in his second year. When a young defensive tackle with that kind of pedigree is ready to step up, you trust the process and let him step up. That is how you build a sustainable defense, not by overpaying veterans to maintain the status quo, but by developing your own guys into the next wave of starters. The article examining these 4 departures asked a very simple question. Who among them is going to have the best season in 2026? And the honest answer is that the most prominent role probably goes to Anzalone, simply because he is going to play the most snaps in Tampa Bay's defense and rack up stats. But for the Lions found better pieces at a better value, and the players coming in are building towards something rather than filling a depth chart gap with a name that was never going to be a long-term solution anyway. Brad Holmes has been burned in free agency before by overpaying, and he has clearly learned the lesson. Let them go. Draft the next generation. Develop what you have. That philosophy has gotten this team to the NFC Championship game and has them projected 5th in the NFL heading into 2026. Now let us talk about this schedule because it is absolutely stacked with storylines. And there are 2 games in particular that every Lions fan should have circled on their calendar in big red permanent marker before the preseason even starts. The first one is Week 2, Thursday Night Football, road game at Buffalo in the brand new Highmark Stadium. This is the first road game of the entire Lions season, and it drops just 4 days after they open at home against the New Orleans Saints on September 13th. Think about that turnaround. 4 days of rest, a short week, a primetime stage, the debut of a brand new NFL stadium in front of an absolutely electric Bills Mafia crowd that is going to be louder than anything any of these players have heard in their professional careers. And on the other side of the ball, the Lions are going to be face-to-face with Josh Allen, a quarterback who has made a living out of turning 3rd and 8 into a 10-yard run, who operates on another level when the moment is biggest, and who the Lions have historically struggled to contain because of what he can do with his legs. The last time these 2 teams played, they combined for 90 points in a 48-42 Bills win right there at Ford Field. 1,080 total yards of combined offense between the 2 teams. It was a shootout at a football arcade, and the Bills pulled it out. Now the Lions have to go into their house on 4 days rest for the debut of an entire new stadium with a crowd that has been waiting for this game since the final brick was laid. There is not a single analyst in the country who is picking Detroit as a heavy favorite in this one, and honestly, they should not be. This is a genuine test. This is the kind of game that tells you something real about your football team. And if the Lions go into that building and win, if they crash the Bills' grand opening party and walk out of Buffalo with a win, that sends a message to the entire NFC that Detroit is not just back. Detroit is dangerous from week 1. The second game that needs to be circled in even bigger red letters is the one at Soldier Field in Chicago. And this one is personal. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator who built one of the most prolific offenses in Detroit Lions history, who shaped Jared Goff's role in the system, who spent years in that building absorbing everything Dan Campbell stands for, is now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. He led Chicago to the NFC North title in his very first season on the job, and Detroit swept him in both meetings that year, both of them, home and away, which means the Lions are sitting at 2-0 against Johnson's Bears, and that number is living rent-free in the man's head whether he admits it or not. The Lions and Bears meet on Thanksgiving at Ford Field in Week 12, and then again at Soldier Field in the final week of the regular season. 2 more shots at Ben Johnson. And you better believe both of those games are going to carry weight that goes well beyond the division standings. Johnson has not been disrespectful toward his former team. He is not out here running his mouth about Detroit, but he has not exactly been warm and fuzzy about it either. He is professional. He is businesslike. But all it takes is one comment, one quote that gets clipped and shared, one moment where the tension between these two organizations boils over into words, and suddenly this rivalry goes from a chapter to a full book. The Lions have swept Johnson twice. If Detroit goes 3-0, 4-0 against his Bears, the storyline writes itself. And given that Johnson is a genuinely gifted defensive mind who has Caleb Williams continuing to evolve in a Bears offense that ranked in the top 10 in rushing and top 10 in passing last season, this is not going to be an easy sweep. These games are going to be wars. And beyond Buffalo and Chicago, the schedule has other fascinating pieces to unwrap. The Lions are playing a regular season game in Munich, Germany in Week 10 against the New England Patriots, a full international trip in the middle of a stretch run that includes 3 games in 12 days. Aaron Glenn comes back to Ford Field in Week 3, leading his New York Jets, facing the team he spent 4 seasons coaching as defensive coordinator. And the Lions close the regular season at Green Bay in a game that could decide the NFC North title all over again. This schedule is not soft. It is winnable. But it demands focus, execution, and the kind of resilience that Dan Campbell builds into his teams at the cellular level. Here's what it all adds up to. The Detroit Lions are walking into the 2026 season with a projection that puts them 5th in the NFL. They navigated a chaotic free agency period where 4 key defensive pieces walked out the door for contracts the organization was never going to match, and they replaced those pieces with better options. They have one of the most favorable schedules in the league. And they have a roster that from top to bottom is loaded with players who know what it takes to compete at the highest level. This is not a team that is trying to figure out if it belongs. This is a team that knows it belongs and is coming back with unfinished business from a season that ended far too early and far too quietly. 10.3 wins in a projection model is the 5th best number in the league. 12 wins from ESPN's own analyst, favorites in all but 3 games, a defense being rebuilt with young talent ready to emerge. A passing attack that could be the most dangerous in the NFC. And a schedule that, for the first time in what feels like years, does not have the Lions staring down a murderer's row from the opening kickoff. The surprises this offseason caught everybody off guard. But when you step back and look at the full picture, the Lions are in a better position than the noise would have you believe. This is a focused, motivated, hungry football team. And 2026 is the year Detroit proves it. If you are watching Lions Focus right now and you have not hit that subscribe button yet, do it today. This is where Lions Nation comes every single day for the news, the breakdowns, the takes, and the conversations that matter. Hit that like button right now. Let's remind the algorithm that the Lions community is one of the most loyal in professional football. Drop your prediction in the comments. How many wins do you think the Lions finish with in 2026? I want to see those numbers. And tell a friend.